This is Dying Your Way.
Welcome everyone to the Dying Your Way podcast. This is the beginning of the Encore series. My name is Claire O'Berry and I am your host. I am really excited for this series that's going to be coming up. I'll be on hiatus before season 5, and I've just gone through many of my previous podcasts. It was hard to choose which one, but the episode that we have today, I think, is really relevant, and it has to do with just the rough time that many people have going through the holidays this time of the year, that are carrying around invisible stories. This season, it's full of lights and celebrations and a lot of good food and good friends and family. But for some of you, there may be an empty chair at the table. There may be anniversaries or what ifs or if only. And they all seem to get louder this time of the year. And it's odd because that's when the world is telling us that we should all be merry and bright. And for some people, that's just really challenging and difficult. So if that's where you find yourself right now, in a very tender, tired, and lonely place, missing someone, I want you to know that there's absolutely nothing wrong with you or where you are in your grief. It's just not a straight line that we go through when we are suffering the loss of a loved one. It's not neat, it's not predictable, and it certainly does not take a holiday just because the calendar says that it does. So that's why I chose this episode as part of our special Encore series, and my guest is Ken Ross. He is the son of Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. He is also the president and founder of the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation, which is known internationally for the incredible work that it's doing in grief education and in death literacy and in awareness of hospice and palliative care at the end of life. And these were just the things that Elisabeth Kübler-Ross held dear throughout her entire life. And now Ken is just expanding on that work. So my hope is that as you listen to this, you have a better understanding of the many aspects of grief and compassion towards yourself and others who may be going through a rough patch this holiday season. And if this conversation supports you, I would encourage you to subscribe. I would also certainly encourage you to share it with others in your family or circle of friends that you think may benefit from this particular episode. And it's just a small way that we can keep this compassionate conversation going about death literacy and all aspects that have to do with death and dying, from diagnosis to grief and bereavement, which is what Dying Your Way is all about. And just sending you lots of love this holiday season. And now let's return to the conversation with Ken Ross.
Hello, everyone. It's just an honor to be here today with my guest, Ken Ross. And before I introduce him to you, I grew up, like all of you, knowing about Elisabeth Kübler-Ross and knowing about Elisabeth Kübler-Ross's work with death and dying. Her legacy lives on because of her son, Ken Ross, who is our guest today. And I was part of an expo where he was a speaker. I was a speaker, but I made a point of wanting to listen to him speak. And I got so much information out of his talk that he gave, and had a real aha moment that the body of work that Elisabeth Kübler-Ross did is unknown, really, to even people in the death and dying community. So I'm going to let Ken explain a lot of that. We're going to delve into that. But before we start, I wish you would all just click the button and subscribe if you are on YouTube. And there's a little bell that you can click to get notifications. And if you're on Apple or Spotify, also please subscribe. It's just really important, I think, the work that we're doing and the speakers that come and are illuminating and educating the conversation around death and dying. So if you like it and subscribe it, more people are going to get out the message and hear about it. So with further ado, I will let you guys meet our wonderful speaker today, who is Ken Ross. If I can find now we're going to go to gallery. Here's Ken. Hi, Ken. How are you?
Hi, Claire. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you. We've gotten mountain time zones straightened out here. And yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'm in Western Australia and Ken is in Arizona, but I didn't know that Arizona has 2 different time zone systems. So
it's pretty crazy out here. And I used to live in Australia. I don't know if you know that.
Where did you live?
I lived in Sydney for a couple of years because my mom used to bring me to Australia for her lectures and workshops, and she loved it out there. And after a couple of times, I fell in love with it, and I actually moved out there.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful place, and it's certainly been a wonderful place to be during COVID because it's pretty much been a non-issue here in Australia. So I wanted to, in the intro, I talked about hearing you at the Beautiful Dying Expo, and you were talking. It was the first time I'd heard you speak, and I thought you were a wonderful speaker, but I had no idea that there was so much more to your mother's work that I was completely unaware of. And I want you to get into that, but beforehand, just let the audience know your role in the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation and what you are doing past and in the future to preserve your mother's legacy.
Well, it's quite a complex job I've given myself. I guess it went back to when I was young. I was traveling with my mom, all the time. A couple of times a year, I'd go anywhere on the planet she was lecturing or giving workshops. And so I ended up traveling with her to about 20 countries. And then, we kind of both were doing our things. And then later on in life, her house burnt down and I moved out here to Arizona.
It was arson, right?
Right. Yeah. She was trying to start a hospice for AIDS babies. And the locals didn't like that. So they were worried she was going to contaminate the groundwater. So they burnt her house down. So she had a small stroke the next day, a TIA, and I moved her down here to Arizona. And within, a very short time, I had 18 boxes of mail from dying patients sitting in my living room. My mom's recovering from a stroke, and I wasn't equipped to deal with it because I was a photographer and just doing my own thing. And so I was really kind of forced into the family business, I guess.
Yeah.
And began taking care of my mother on, her publicity, her business needs, her physical health care, taking care of the farm. It was a pretty crazy life. And I did that for 9 years. And then she passed and died. Sorry, we don't like that word passed. And then I decided we really need to start a foundation because people were writing every day from around the world and wanted my mom's wisdom and some kind of shred of inspiration from her. So I started this foundation without really knowing what I was doing. I thought the foundation would do all the work and I'd get to be a photographer, but I gradually got drawn into it further and further. And here I am 16 years later, still running the foundation.
And a major spokesperson for death and dying and advocate for death and dying.
Still trying to find the secret sauce because there's no right and wrong way, but some things work better than others. And what worked maybe 5 years ago doesn't work now. And trying to help continue the conversation and also re-educate the public about my mom's legacy, because they have a very kind of monolithic view of what she accomplished. It's all about the 5 stages, which is, my mother hated that. And
so, okay, I want to get to that in just a second. So let's just, assuming that nobody has heard of Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, which I can't believe, but just assuming no one has, the 5 stages of death that she pointed out in her book on death and dying are?
They are DABDA, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But as you may have heard on the presentation, when I just happen to have the book here, so this is, the actual book, so I'm not making this up, and we go and look at the chart, and we see that, Elisabeth wrote about more than 5 stages, right? I mean, there's 10 stages here, and she talked about many other things as being a part of the grief, continuum. But the main point was that Elisabeth was trying to explain at a time when grief was one thing, that grief is complicated, right? So people come to me and say, oh, your mother was wrong, grief is complicated. I'm like, that's what she was saying. That's exactly her message in 1969, is that grief is not one thing. It's composed of many components, and the 5 stages are really like a shorthand for a much more complicated model or, experience. But she said, no one's going to remember it if I talk about 10 or 15 or 20 stages.
Right.
I'm going to break it down into the essential, typically main things that people experience. We're just going to call it the 5 stages because people will remember that. But obviously, there's many other things that happen. It happens in different ways. There's more than one stage happens at one time. Sometimes there's no stages or phases or whatever you want to call it. But the point is, I just want to explain that grief is complicated. So that's the whole idea behind the stages. But, with the media demonstrating the 5 stages on The Simpsons and, whatever TV show, people get the idea like, oh, that's how Elisabeth explained it. You have to graduate this to get to acceptance. I'm like, well, no, that's, that's from 30 Rock, or whatever TV show you've seen.
I watched an interview with Oprah Winfrey with your mother. And, she had already had her stroke and she was still very cognizant and able, to communicate fully.
I was in the room that day, actually.
I think I saw you at the room, actually. And she, what I heard her say was, because Oprah asked her about her own experience of going through the stages of grief, and she was a perfect example of what you were just saying, that as she was coming to grips with her own mortality, she got stuck in anger for a very long time. And she skipped some of the stages altogether.
Right.
So she was a perfect...
So Elisabeth talked about preparatory grief, shock, partial denial. She talked about anxiety, all these other things that are part of the experience. But, again, she was just trying to break it down so that the common person in the street could remember that, hey, grief is going to be complicated. It's not just going to be one thing. So, and after 1974 or so, she really didn't talk about the stages anymore, but society could never let go of it. And so people always said, oh, Elisabeth, all she talks about is the 5 stages. I'm like, no, she didn't talk about it for decades. And she only brought it up in On Grief and Grieving because she was so frustrated with society's obsession with these stages that she felt she had to go back and further explain it. But basically, society forced her to talk about it because she didn't talk about it in her lectures at all. She's like, okay, that's the past. Okay, society has developed. We're talking about grief and grieving now. Let's move the conversation forward. But, everyone else wants to go back and obsess about the stages. People that are dying go through grief of their own demise, but, they tend to use the 5 stages for people that are left after a person has died. And I was also interested that your mother was, besides grief work, she was such a pioneer in palliative care at end of life. Yeah, I mean, the media is so strange. I just had someone write me and say Elisabeth didn't support hospice. I'm like, seriously? Like,
What?
I mean, hello? Like, so, that's what I'm constantly fighting against is this like misinformation in the press. It just so happens I have this video, The Pioneers of Hospice, and
Changing the
Elizabeth
pace of
is
dying.
right as the Pioneers of Hospice, and she's one of the 4 pioneers. I mean, so,
Yeah.
that was her mission. She started dozens and dozens of hospices all around the world. She started the first hospices in many countries. People
Yeah.
don't realize that. I mean, that was much bigger than the 5 stages, but people don't tend to talk about that. I was with her starting hospices in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, and Brazil, all these places around the world. The first hospice in the Netherlands is named after her, for example.
Mm. So the foundation now, you have some very impressive people that are on the board of your foundation, which, by the way, is a 501c3. It's a nonprofit organization, but it's
Right.
global. And you have some really outstanding people that are on that board. What are they doing now about promoting palliative care globally?
Well, we have a lot of educational programs, especially in Latin America. So we're training doctors at universities. We have workshops. We go out into the field. We're doing hospice projects. Like we just started the first pediatric hospice in Chile. And so we're training the doctors to work in that hospice because they're not experienced with working with children in palliative care. And we're working on a hospice in Rio. There's no hospices in Rio, which is just unbelievable. And we were just donated some land in Guatemala, for example. We're going to be building a hospice specifically for the indigenous people, right? Because they have different cultural needs that obviously are not being addressed by, the more westernized people in the cities.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of hospice work, a lot of palliative care training. We're with Stephen Connor and Joan Marston and Dr. Raja Kapal, who's like the father of palliative care in India.
Mm-hmm.
And Diane Gray, and a lot of people in the U.S., but also we'd like to be EKR Global, not EKR USA.
Yeah,
So
Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, yeah.
Right. So we have about a dozen chapters now in 11 countries, and we have 8 more countries we're talking to start groups in Lebanon, in Spain, Bolivia, Colombia, all over the place.
So the challenges of people I have found, I'll just speak from my own experience, not only a lot of things that happen are when someone has a life-threatening illness. They don't know what to ask for. They don't know to ask for an end-of-life doula. They don't know to ask for palliative care. They don't know, and a lot of doctors don't even know to offer that to them. When I was living in Dallas, I was helping a client and I was looking for a palliative care doctor. And so I just Googled, Dallas palliative care MD. Two doctors came up. Now I know that more than 2 doctors in Dallas practice palliative care, but they don't have that as a specialty. Right. So in your work globally, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have in getting access to people?
Well, the problem is a lot of this work is in the United States, in Europe. And so when we're talking to other countries, it tends to be from our perspective, right? And people are always talking about diversity. But then I see people lecturing to these people in other countries, but they're saying the U.S. perspective, right? So, and we heard this complaint for many years, when we're working in other countries, giving lectures and so forth. And so the light bulb went off. It's like, we really can't run the foundation just from the U.S. We need to have people on the ground in these countries to be culturally sensitive because, we don't know the situation in Bolivia or Lebanon or, Rwanda or different places. Those people know what they need and where each society is in the development because every country, even if they're neighbors in Latin America, is on a different path, and different area of development. So, Argentina has maybe 17 hospices. but they don't have any pediatric hospice, or maybe they have palliative care, but there's no hospice. And the regulations are different in different countries. And so we found by having individual chapters is much easier to kind of go, okay, this is where we're at on this development line. We're starting from here. So what do you need? What can we provide you? Who do you want to contact? We have lots of resources. Let us know how you need to begin. If you don't know, we'll just start at a certain point and you tell us if we're too far ahead or too far behind. Then we'll pick up the conversation, and then we're connecting all our groups together so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel each time.
That's so much to coordinate. I mean, that's a huge task that you're doing.
It's a lot of busy work. Like, for example, we're starting a TV channel called grieftv.com.
Wow.
And we're going to start with approximately 250 videos that will each be in 5 different languages, right? So, and we're trying not to have US speakers or European speakers, but we really want to have a mix of speakers from different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages, different, socioeconomic levels, so that we're speaking to everybody. And, also we find the problem is like a lot of the material is in English, and we forget even in America that, there's a million different Vietnamese speakers. There's, 1,800,000 Burmese speakers, Thai speakers. All these people are not being attended to even in our own country because, we have death doulas, but a death doula can't go into a Thai family or a Russian family or, an indigenous person's family
without a translator.
Yeah. Just the translation, the cultural differences, how they mourn, what's okay to say and not say, which things to address and how to address them. So, there's a lot of diversity that is not being addressed, and not just languages, but in every way, shape, and form, religiously in different ways. So, it's a big task, and we're not going to do it alone, obviously, but, we're just helping to diversify the conversation.
So I'm just curious, going back to your mom, because, you hear the term physician, heal thyself, and which is sort of a joke, meaning that the physician's going to be the last person to get the right medical care that he needs, or the CPA is going to have the worst set of personal books or whatever. How was your mother when she was dying in handling her own death?
She was a pain in the tush. It's like you can't teach the teacher, right?
Yeah.
So for 9 years, Elisabeth was saying, Kenneth, I want to die. I'm bored. I've done my work. It wasn't that she was suicidal. It's just like, okay, I've done my work. Death is no big deal. I'm ready to check out. And, she couldn't. And it really pissed her off. So I'm dealing with her publicity and her 86 publishers and her visitors. And, she loved to go shopping every day. And she had a ton of mail and people showing up from around the world doing all sorts of, interesting things. Sometimes it was crazy. Sometimes no one would show up and she'd have a hard time because she was partially paralyzed. And other days there'd be 15 people lined up at her front door to go visit Elisabeth, right? And you've got Tibetan monks and you've got, rappers and you've got royalty. It was really crazy. So
I bet.
And I'd go to my mom's house and she was gone. Her car is gone. Her rugs are gone. There's American Indians building a teepee in her driveway. So every week it was a different soap opera. You never knew what soap opera you were going to run into the following week. So, it was difficult because she was bored and angry and she was a workaholic, right? She began her work when she was roughly 40 years old and retired in her 60s. And in a time, she wrote 24 books, started the hospice movement to some degree, the palliative care movement, wrote hundreds of chapters. She was traveling around the world doing AIDS projects, vet projects, beginning the first hospices in jail in the 1980s. She was doing workshops. She had a running farm. She saw patients. She was a mom. It was insane how much she did. And then she was paralyzed, right? So, anybody is going to be angry with that and frustrated, right? If you're a workaholic. So she couldn't sit still, and yet she had to. So finally, after 9 years, one day she turned to me and she said, Kenneth, I am not ready to die. And I'm like, what? and then she changed the subject, right? And no explanation, no nothing. I'm like, what is she talking about? And she wouldn't like go back to that conversation, that like miniature conversation. And then a few weeks later, she died. And it took me years of thinking about this. And I thought, aha, this is exactly what she said. She said, when you learn your lessons, you're allowed to graduate and die. And so when she learned her final lesson of self-care, letting go of her anger, and just letting people take care of her, she graduated. It was incredible to see, wow, she really, she was totally right about that.
I think what you were saying is that what your mother said was that she said that she was ready to die.
She was ready, but she really wasn't ready.
So she said, I'm not ready to die, or she said, I'm ready to die.
She said she doesn't want to die. After 9 years of saying, I want to die, then all of a sudden, Kenneth, I don't want to die. I'm not ready to go. I'm like, what? Like, you've been saying for 9 years you're ready to go. And now after 9 years, what are you talking about? And then it was just like a little clue, like, Kenneth, I've let go of my anger, right? Which meant, okay, she's ready to graduate.
Yeah.
But it took her 9 years to learn that final lesson and let go of her anger and let other people take care of her, which she could never do. Because, she was always the one taking care of thousands of people like every month. And when she let go of all that, she was allowed to graduate.
I love that term, graduate.
Yeah.
Instead of passing
for her,
away.
Death is like, going down to the corner store. I mean, what's the big deal?
Yeah. So she also did studies in near-death experiences, right?
Yeah. NDEs. A lot of people don't know this, but in On Death and Dying, 1969, she talked about life after death, and the publisher forced her to take it out of the book. So there was a 13th chapter about NDEs, and the publisher's like, no, this is too far out. You got to take it out. Otherwise, no one's going to respect this book and no one's going to believe it. And so she reluctantly took it out. But even in the 60s, she was talking about NDEs.
Have you been able to recover that chapter?
Unfortunately, I found out about this only a few years ago from her associate who was himself dying. And he said, let's talk about it more next time you come back. And unfortunately, he died soon after that. And I was not able to find out if he had the chapter, but I've not been able to locate it. Obviously, she talked about it later. She did several books on it, and some of her best-selling work even now. So her best-selling work in German and Spanish is her books about life after death. Could
you give me some titles? The near-death experience or life after death?
It just so happens I have one here in my little library. This is one book I really love, The Tunnel and the Light. And this is just filled with just wonderful stories about people who are on the edge and, are saying things which have no, rational explanation. So she loved to talk about it, and she wanted to in the 60s, but it was too far out. And even in the 70s, she began talking about it in the mid-late 70s. She got a lot of blowback from it. And, there's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles like just blasting Elisabeth because she's gone crazy and she's talking to spooks and all this stuff. She's like, they're just not ready for it. One day they'll learn. So she goes, the problem's not with me. The problem's with you. So,
they'll graduate. They'll find out.
Exactly. She goes, it's going to come out whether you're ready for it or not. I'm just reporting what patients have told me. I'm not, making this stuff up. Don't blame me for being the messenger.
No, I've been around many people that have had near-death awarenesses, and I've had a couple of my own near-death experiences. So, once you've, whether you see other people see it or you experience it yourself, it is, you just don't even see what the big deal is, but quite honestly.
People have been to the edge, rarely are afraid to die ever again because, they know. So.
Yeah. Well, so you have this full life. You live in Arizona. I know you have a cat. I saw your cat. But
five. My mother said anything worth doing is worth overdoing, basically. So,
and doing with a cat.
Right, so I rescued 5 cats.
Well, so I know that, during the pandemic, I'm sure that, you were home more than you normally have been, but
Mhm.
what are you doing to kind of balance all the work that you're doing in your own personal life?
But typically, my balance comes from traveling, even if it's for work. I just love to travel. You know, growing up, I met lots of dying people. When I was, 8, 10, 12, my mother was bringing home dying kids and saying, "Hey, Kenneth, when to go play with this person while I make dinner," and they have these intense conversations for someone my age. And so, I grew up knowing that the clock is ticking and we never know when, the alarm's going to go off and we're going to check out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, wow, life is short and precarious. I got to do something interesting with my life. So my dad had all these National Geographics, and I thought that would be like an amazing life just to go out and be one of those photographers who sees the world and climbs mountains and hangs out of helicopters and meets tribal people and movie stars and go into factory and see how things are made and photograph them. And I thought that's really an interesting, diverse life. And I was also very quiet. So I thought, I can just kind of hide behind the camera and I don't have to like talk and interact much. I'll just photograph life and experience it through the camera. And so my goal was always to photograph 101 countries, which I just did last November. I got to my 101st country, Guatemala.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, traveling is a great release for me. I just love diversity. I just love seeing other cultures and sampling other foods and just, kind of rolling the dice and see what happens. I'll get a one-way ticket to some country with a week or 2 or 3 and just have no plans and just, I won't read anything, don't do any research. I just go and land and go into the middle of the city and just an adventure begins.
Well, I'm very appreciative that you've come in front of the camera to share a bit of yourself with us today. If people want to get hold of you or donate to the foundation, so what is people are motivated to get some of these, new aspects of Elisabeth Kübler-Ross.
Mm-hmm.
Where can they find her books? Where can they get more information to donate? What do you recommend?
What's the story? Well, we have a website, of course. We have many websites. In the U.S., we have EKR, Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, ekrfoundation.org. But we also have websites in Spanish, Portuguese, Flemish, French, and Japanese that I can think of. And I think we need to make one in German soon. So many languages. And but the main one is ekrfoundation.org. And we're doing educational seminars on them. We're just wrapping up our second series now. We just had Dr. Ira Byock speak for us last week. And Dr. William Warden speaking for us tomorrow on the 4 phases. And so I think we're going to be doing 2 or 3 a year. We also have other seminars in Latin America, which are often translated into multiple languages. So if you missed the one from the U.S., which is not really from the U.S., but the one we organize, we have a multitude of lectures. There's one coming up in Mexico. There's one in Argentina. There's another one from our second group in Mexico in September. There's a lot of things going on. I think France is doing something.
So they could contact you through the website, the EKR website. They could, if they needed to follow up with anything about our interview with you, that's the best way to contact you.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then we're trying to do more things like this grieftv.com. And we're trying to build some kind of calendar so that everyone can keep track of the seminars around the world and which seminars are in which languages and so forth. But that's so complex, we haven't really got a handle on that yet. It's a big project.
Yeah, well, I really can't thank you enough for your time and for your just getting the message and the conversation about your mother's work. And now I really think of it as your work, and I'm just really, really grateful for what you do. And
thank you. I feel like I'm just a cog in the wheel here. I'm just trying to push the buttons and plant the seeds like my mom did.
Yeah. Well, I know our paths will cross again, Ken, and thank you so very much for being with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, and hope we can talk again, Claire.
Okay. Thank you for joining us on Dying Your Way. If it's inspired you, then please spread the word. Leave a rating and review so others can find out about us. To learn more, connect with us on Facebook or our website at dyingyourway.com. A special thank you for the artist Mel Dobra for letting us use her song, Smoke and Flame, as the soundtrack of our show. I invite you to return, hear each episode, and be part of the conversation on death literacy. I am Claire O'Berry, and this is Dying Your Way.